You describe stress as the new addiction.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we addicted to stress?
It's a status symbol. It's a status symbol. So there are two ways we invite stress proudly into our life. One way is I'm busy is a badge of honor now, right? It's like I'm busy means I'm wanted, I'm needed, okay? It means that, look at me, I have enough to do, right? And sadly, if you're not in that space, you start to tell yourself, maybe I should be in that space. The opposite of sanity, if you ask me, right? Other is because we're unable to sit with our brains. We're unable to simply say, look, I'm just going to sit down and reflect on the week. Because if you start to sit with yourself, demons pop up. Like, oh, you're not good enough. Oh, they didn't like you when you said this. Oh, right? All of the negative thoughts pop up. And interestingly, that psychological discomfort, if you want, one of the easiest way beyond social media, and one of the easiest ways to get rid of it is to keep your brain busy in something else. So you keep adding stuff, right? And in a very interesting way, I think you and I both experience that. You make decisions, you design your life, and then the stress follows 2.5 months later, okay? I know for a fact, this is my 4th book, right? And even though Alice is really, really, really doing an amazing amount of the work that's needed for the book, I get burned out every book, right? Publishing a book is just a grueling job, simply because people don't buy books because of the content that's in them, right? They buy them because of the marketing that you do about them, right? And it's my biggest job if I want to get 1 million people out of stress, to simply make people pre-order the book. Because if they pre-order the book pops up on the bestseller list, and then 1 million people, not 1 million, but 100,000 people get to see it every day and think about stress, right? The challenge is, it's going to happen. And yet you add a couple of speaking engagements and 4 podcast recordings and 1 trip to do this, and right? And then in the middle of all of this, which actually it was my year this year, and my mom fell, and I lost my brother and my sister, and it was a very difficult year. But I didn't know that this was going to be the case back in November when I was planning my February and March, right? And so we're going through those cycles, and then suddenly life pops up and goes like, all right, let me show you what it is, okay? And yet, on the next book or on the next tour or on the next, work appointment, we just overload ourselves to the point that is beyond human. It is, if you ask me, it has all of the symptoms of addiction, okay? It is a substance almost that we're using because it justifies to us that this is the way we should live.
So what would my workaholic brain say? My workaholic brain would rebuttal you, Mo, and say, well, if I don't load my calendar and if I don't work 100-hour weeks, then I'm going to miss out on my own potential. I'm not going to live the life I could have lived. If I keep working like this, I'm going to be able to get a big plane and a mansion and a sports car, and I'm going to be free and I'm going to have the best holidays and the best food. So that's why I'm doing it.
Absolutely not the truth. You know that for a fact that the week you don't work is the week you are most productive. You know that for a fact that, think about it, huh? I could load my calendar with 1 million podcast interviews, and that would never allow me the time to write a book. The reason why you may make a difference to anything, to your relationship with your loved ones, to your career, to your a contribution to whatever, is because you allow yourself those spaces in which creativity happens, in which ingenuity happens, in which real connection happens, in which, and that for a fact, that you're heading to Australia, that you're going to produce nothing in that trip other than consuming what you've produced before. Correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. And so So the question is, where is the balance? Is the balance in me loading my calendar for my potential, or is the balance in freeing my calendar for my potential? So this year, for example, I struggled with two things. I mean, my team is an incredible team who are very motivated, very, very hardworking, and each carries a separate responsibility, right? So they'd all pull on my availability, right, to get things achieved. And so what do? One will pop up and say, I have this incredible guest, this Stephen Bartlett guy is a great guy. You should have him on your podcast. You're going to be in London that day. Why don't you invite him over? Right? And then another will say, oh, but hold on, this newspaper wants to talk to you. And then a third will say, oh, but there is this customer that wants you to speak, and so on, right? And what ends up happening is that you and I don't blame you, and every one of us, when presented with opportunities, you go like, come on, man, push yourself a little bit, right? Two things happen. You push yourself to the point where you end up getting burned out, okay? By the way, I say that with love, but especially when you get older, like your body just can't take it anymore, right? At the same time, what ends up happening is that you're depriving yourself of the true productivity. The true productivity is that 1 hour in the morning where you're not stressed, where your calendar is not loaded, where you sit down and write the perfect email to someone that changes something, or make the perfect call to someone that does something for you, or you write down a concept that fits in your next book, and so on and so forth. And that applies to everyone. Huh? It is that 1 hour in the morning where I make my coffee and I sit with Hannah, my wife, and we connect so deeply. Right? It's that 1 hour. And the question is, how valuable is that? How valuable is that hour as compared to the consumption hours? All of the hours where you're being used not to realize your potential, but to react to potential you've already achieved. And for all of work, I mean, when I ran my business at Google, I refused to be in meetings openly. I was like, why? And by the way, I encouraged my people. The idea of showing up in a meeting is just to say, hey, by the way, I'm here. I clicked in the morning, stamped my entry card or whatever. I don't know what you call it in English, but I attended, and I'm alive. Look at me. I'm sending an email just so that you know I exist, right? I think in my entire career, 12 years at Google, I sent 4 emails. I initiated 4 emails. Okay. Yes, I responded to emails that basically said, Mo, what do you think of that? If an email didn't say, Mo, what did you think of that? I wouldn't respond.
Why?
They're not asking for my opinion. Why should I?
Why weren't you initiating more emails?
Because you initiate one email and you get a shitload of emails back, right? And what's the point? Right? Why don't you just simply tell yourself, hey, by the way, I have no need to prove that I exist. The proof that I exist is I deliver my numbers, right? And so when I initiated an email, people read it.
So how did you get things done then?
Called people.
Phone calls?
Or walks or conversations in the corridors, or a quick like, hey, by the way, what's up with this? And we had weekly reviews, and we had lots of connections, human connections, right? By the way, most of the time, nothing requires you to interrupt the flow, most of the time, to interrupt the flow of the week. Nothing cannot be discussed in the weekly review on Monday, right? And I think that the reality is that we're saying it's an addiction. You're creating all of those circumstances to make it look like everything is so, like it's so crucial, and it's so urgent, and it's so important because we can squeeze out that 5% more efficiency. Yeah, I give up on the 5% more. And 95% of the efficiency you can achieve with 20% of the work.
If you love the Diary of a CEO brand and you watch this channel, please do me a huge favor. Become part of the 15% of the viewers on this channel that have hit the subscribe button. It helps us tremendously, and the bigger the channel gets, the bigger the guests.